Resourceful Designer, episode 162, Client Onboarding, part 3, the client meeting.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. His favorite Beatle is George. Mark Dickhout.
Welcome to the show. I am so glad that you've joined me this week. This episode is part 3 of the client onboarding process. This time around, I'll be discussing the client meeting, how to get ready for it, and what to do during your meeting as well as afterwards. Now, if you haven't listened to the previous 2 episodes of this series, I highly suggest you go back to episode 160 and start there. Now, I'll also be sharing I don't know if it's really a resource or a tip of the week, but it's something that can help you stay focused while you work, before ending the episode with a question from Scott about ways to attract clients. Now, I always like to share a little bit of what I've been up to this week, and this week was a fun week. Last week it was kind of boring and just grunt work, but this week was much more fun. I completed a couple of podcast artworks. I got started on a website that I mentioned last week, but most fun of all is I'm in the middle of designing a t-shirt for a local dance company. Now, I've been designing their recital t-shirts since, well, really, I don't know since when. I started doing it when I used to work at the print shop, and every year they'd get me to design it, and when I came on my own, that client followed me, and I know if I look through my folders now, this is the 15th year that I've designed their t-shirt on my own. And then I know I had done it for some previous years at the print shop. So I don't know how many years, but it's been at least 15 years that I've been designing their t-shirt. And what I love about this is the woman who runs the dance studio. All she does every year is she sends me an email saying, Mark, this year our theme is whatever. And she tells me what the year's theme is, because every year they choose a theme for their recital. And then she lets me do anything I want for the t-shirt. So I love this project when it comes down every year. This year's theme is From the Heart, and I've decided to go with kind of a 60s style design, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Not to mention, I use my print brokering services to get the t-shirts made, so I make a couple of extra bucks there as well. So it's a fun project all around. So that's what I've been up to this week. Now, this week's resource, or maybe tip, I don't know, you can use it either way, is a way for you to possibly stay focused while you work. Now, I know a lot of designers that have to listen to music while they're working. I'm personally not one of them. I cannot concentrate if I have any music on. I have tried it many times in the past, but I end up listening to the music and I can't concentrate on design. But I did find something that, although I'm still not 100% sold on it, I have tried it and it is fun, and that's focus music. Anybody out there who does like to have music, especially people that have problems with their ears, if you have tinnitus, I think that's how you say it, which is a ringing in your ear constantly, those people often need some sort of music in order to drown out that ringing to help them concentrate. Well, focus music is perfect for that. Now, what I'm talking about focus music is just non-lyrical. It's just instrumental music that is downbeat and soft tone in order to keep you in a focused mood. Now, if you subscribe to Spotify or Apple Music, or if you're part of Amazon Prime and you get music through Amazon, you can search for playlists. And I tried this. I'm part of Apple Music. Actually, I've got Spotify and they're the other ones. I got the family packs for my family. They use it more than I do. I barely ever listen to music. But I went into Apple Music and I did a search for focus. That's it, just the word focus. And it came up with numerous playlists filled with ambient type music, low beat music that is perfect background music to help you concentrate. Some of the playlists I came across in Apple Music were pure focus, study beats that says it's a great one to help you study, leave it on in the background. And another one is pure ambient. And I listened through some of these. I had them playing earlier this week. And again, I'm not somebody who listens to music on a regular basis. So to me, it was nice. They were not distracting. I was able to work, but I work just as well without music. But if you're somebody that needs to have something going on, then try this. Go into your favorite music platform and just do a search for focus. and see what sort of playlists you can find. So that's this week's, as I said, I don't know if it's a resource or a tip of the week, but that's what I wanted to share. And now, Client Onboarding, Part 3, the Client Meeting. Now, in the last episode, Part 2 of the Client Onboarding process, I told you all about the intro packet and how the intro packet is the foundation for setting expectations going forward with you and your client in order to build that relationship. Well, if the intro packet is the foundation, then the client meeting is the framing or the structure, if you will. Think of the client meeting like, well, it's like a job interview, which I guess in a way it is. You are interviewing your client, and your client is interviewing you. You're both trying to see if the other person is the right one to fill the position they're looking for, whether it be a client or a designer. At this stage, the meeting is less about the design project and more about discovering if this client, this person you're meeting with, is somebody you want to have a working relationship with going forward. See, both parties need to feel comfortable working with each other before anything else can proceed. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking this first client meeting is part of the discovery process. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of the normal questions you would ask during discovery may come up during your first client meeting, but that's not the purpose of this meeting. You can always go back and revisit those things later. The real discovery process only comes after the contracts have been signed and you've received deposits from your clients. Now, if you're interested in knowing more about the discovery process, I do have a podcast episode 120, which was titled Discovery Process, Doing It Right. You can go back to listen to that one if you want to know more about the discovery process. But the client meeting is the part with the nitty gritty, for lack of a better term. It's the part when the client explains to you what it is they're looking for and why they reached out to you to possibly work with. It's not a deep dive into their design project. It's a fact-finding mission. The client meeting is a chance for you to gather information so that you can then prepare a proposal to present to the client for the project. You don't want to go too deep here because at this point, you are not working together. You have to remember that. At this stage of the game, they are not yet your client. You are still trying to onboard them. Now, if you did use an intro packet, like I suggested last episode, then you also have the benefit of going into the client meeting knowing that the ground rules are already established, and this potential client you're meeting with knows how you work, and they still want to proceed to the next step. And that's always a great place to start. Now, meeting with a potential client for the very first time can be both exhilarating and it can be terrifying. Exhilarating because it's a fresh slate. You are being presented and possibly entrusted with a brand new design project. And at this stage, the possibilities are endless. If this meeting goes well with the client, it can be the start of a long and lucrative relationship. It's exciting. However, it can also feel a bit terrifying. The client is potentially entrusting you with the responsibility of finding some kind of design solution that works for whatever it is they're trying to solve. They have a problem, they're coming to you, and they're hoping that you have the solution. That can be a lot of weight on somebody's shoulders. If you don't impress the client during that first meeting, there's a very good possibility that your hopeful potential relationship will be over before it even gets a chance to start. So what can you do the first time you meet with them during the whole client onboarding process? What can you do in order to sway things in your favor and convince the client that you are the designer for their job? That's what I want to talk about today. Before I go any further, I just want to state that of the entire client onboarding process, the client meeting is the part with the most variables. Since every client is different, and of course, every design project they bring to you is different, it only makes sense that every client meeting will be different as well. What I'm hoping to establish with this third part of the series here is an informal guideline for you to follow that will hopefully give you the best chance of success each and every time you meet a client. Because remember, until the contract is signed, this client can always walk away. Okay, so let's get to it. How do you meet with a client? Obviously, there are many ways two individuals can communicate. But when it comes to an initial meeting with a potential client, there are really only 3 methods that matter. And in order of importance, they're meeting the client in person, 2, meeting the client over video, and finally 3, if need be, talking to the client over the phone. It doesn't matter how busy you are or how busy the client is, your first meeting should never take place via text, meaning email or instant messaging or any sort of messaging service. I'll go so far as to say that most of your meetings with your clients, even beyond this first one, even after the contract is signed, most of your client meetings should be in some sort of face-to-face method, whether over video, in person, or in worst case, over the phone. The problem with the written word is it can be interpreted in many different ways. It's very easy to take something out of context or misread something and inadvertently change the meaning of what the writer had intended to say. Not to mention, personality seldom, if ever, comes through in the written word. And personality plays such a huge role in the ever important relationship building that you need to do with clients. I've said it so many times over the course of this entire podcast that in order for you to succeed, you have to build relationships with clients. And you cannot do that if they can't see your personality and you can't see their personality. It's almost impossible to build a meaningful relationship with them. So do whatever you can to have at least that very first client meeting, either face-to-face, in person, or video, or as an alternative, over the phone, but never over text. So once you've set up a client meeting, it's time for you to start preparing. Remember how I said that the client meeting is like a job interview? Well, if you were going to a job interview, you wouldn't be going in there without doing some sort of research about the company you were interviewing with, would you? Well, the same goes for a client meeting. You want to know things about the client before you actually meet with them. Google their company or themselves if it's an individual. Read through their website if they already have one. Quickly look up their competition. I mean, you don't have to do a deep dive. Again, this is not discovery, but a little bit of knowledge about who you're going to meet will go a long way. And that little bit of time you spend researching the client can help impress them. The client will appreciate your knowledge of them that you display during the client meeting. Now, in preparation, just like if this was a job interview, you don't want to be late for the client meeting. So make sure you double check where the meeting is taking place. You want to make sure you know how to get to the meeting if it's someplace unfamiliar to you. You also want to know how long it takes to get to the meeting and pad that so that you make sure. You're much better off to get there 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour beforehand and wait around the corner than to show up late for the meeting. And finally, make sure you know exactly who you are meeting with. The person's name, if it's multiple people, know all their names. Who your principal contact is, know who they are. You do not want to show up to a meeting and not know the name of the person you're supposed to meet with. So that's some of the prep work, but other prep work is yourself as an individual. You need to physically prepare for a client meeting. Have you ever heard of the term dress for success? Unfortunately, when running a design business, your abilities, your skills as a designer are not always enough to land you that client. In fact, in some cases, the way you look can play a factor in whether or not a client hires you. It's sad, but it's true. I would be a very happy man if I could live the remainder of my life wearing just jeans and a t-shirt. But life and business doesn't work that way. If you show up to a client meeting with, let's say, I don't know, maybe your client is a bank and you show up to meet the bank manager, or you show up at some big law firm and you're going to meet with the controlling partners, and you're dressed in ripped jeans and a baggy t-shirt, I can guarantee they're not going to take you seriously, and the chances of you getting the job is very slim. So before going to your meeting, try to get a feel for who the client is and dress appropriately. In a lot of cases, a business casual, I think that's how they call it, a business casual look, maybe something like a nice, well-pressed golf shirt, or ladies, maybe a nice blouse. Sometimes that's all that's required, as long as you look presentable. But sometimes, to win over the client, you may have to clean up a bit more than that. Meaning, guys, make sure you're clean shaven and put on a shirt and tie if the client merits it. Ladies, pull out that nice skirt or pantsuit and make yourself presentable to the level of the client you're going after. Always err on the side of caution. It's better to be awkwardly overdressed for a client meeting than to create a bad first impression by being underdressed. And please, unless you're Chris Doe of the future or Aaron Draplin, leave the ball cap at home. Sure, we creative types love the freedom to express ourselves, but save it for your other outings, not your client meetings. So that's preparing yourself physically, but how do you prepare yourself mentally for a client meeting? Because preparing yourself mentally is crucial to your success. You need to think positively about the outcome of the meeting. Henry Ford is famous for his quote, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." Think about that. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, whichever way you think, you are right. So go into the meeting thinking you can. You have to think positively. If you go into a client meeting thinking, man, I don't know if I have a chance of getting this project, well, there's a very good chance that you will fail in getting that project. Remind yourself, you are at that client meeting for a reason. The client asked to meet you. They wouldn't have done that if they were not already convinced that you have the potential to be the person for the job. So all you have to do is show them that their assessment is correct. Go in there with a positive attitude, and they will know that they made the right choice. Remember, you are capable. You know what you're doing. You have the skills needed to get the client's job done. Skills that the client and nobody the client currently works with have. That's why they've reached out to you. So own it. So now that you're prepared physically and you're prepared mentally, it's time to go into your client meeting. And anytime you do this, like anything in life, first impressions count. When you first meet the client, you want to create the best first impression you can. So don't slouch. Try not to look nervous. No matter how nervous you are, try not to look nervous. Try to walk into the meeting with an air of confidence. Stand tall. Look the client in the eye and smile. Try to put your hand out and shake theirs before they have a chance to offer their hand to you. And please, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, make sure you have a firm handshake. If you're not sure, find someone to practice with. Find many people to practice with and practice over and over until you have a nice, solid handshake. Nothing deflates an air of confidence like a limp handshake. And finally, this one is more just out of etiquette. If you're meeting somewhere on the client's turf, or anywhere for that matter, allow the client to sit before you take your seat. Never sit down before the client does. So now that you're face-to-face with the client, and of course those previous things are if you're meeting face-to-face, which is the number one method you should be doing it. But some of this still applies if you're on video or on phone. You still want to look at the camera. The one thing is, with video, it's hard if you're looking at notes. Look into the camera. It's awkward, but look directly into the camera because then it looks like you're looking directly into their eyes. And even if you're on the phone, smile. You would be amazed at how a smile can come through in your voice. So even if the person can't see you, you're talking on the phone with them, smile while you're talking. and it'll come through in your voice, in your demeanor, in your character, and the client will notice. So now that it's time for the meeting to actually start, well, what do you talk about? Well, you don't just dive into the business. Remember, you're trying to create a relationship here. So before diving into the reason you're there at the meeting, it's always a good idea to engage in a bit of small talk and get comfortable with each other. This is the first stage of building a relationship with them. Keep the conversation about positive things. It's okay to talk about the nice weather, but do not complain about bad weather, or do not complain about the traffic that you had on the way over there, or anything else that would be considered a complaint. If you do, it just makes it sound like you're somebody that's easily annoyed, and that could turn the client off. So try to find positive things to talk about. Look around their office. If they have little mementos or stuff, maybe you can talk about them. If they have pictures of families, you can ask them about their children or their pets or whatever. Keep the conversation positive. Now, you want to be confident as you're talking, but you don't want to come off as overbearing. Try to act the same way you would on a first date. Now, some of you, if you're like me, your first date was a few decades ago, so it might be a little bit hard to imagine it. But try to imagine how you would act on your first date. Would you give a second chance to someone who sounded desperate? Of course you wouldn't. You would be completely thrown off by them. So you don't want to sound desperate during your meeting. No matter how badly you want their project, no matter how badly you need the work, you don't want to sound desperate. You need to be confident, but not overbearing. In fact, you want to try to come across like you don't actually need their work. You're interested, but it's not something you actually need. Let the client think that you're busy, that you're in demand. In fact, if you do, it'll make the client want to work with you even more. I can't tell you how many times I've had a web design project where I've told the client that I won't be able to touch their project for a couple of months, and they would tell me, well, we've got a tight deadline. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm just completely swamped right now. I can't start your project for a couple of months. And just that fact, they thought, man, he must be good if he's booked that far in advance. I want to work with them. I've had clients tell me after the fact that that's why they stuck around and they waited for me to work on it, because they figured if I was in that much demand, I must be worth working with. So try to build an air that you don't really need their work. Now, I've said it several times on the podcast before, but it merits mentioning again, and that is clients prefer to work with a good designer they like than an amazing designer that they don't like. So this client meeting is your chance to show the client that you are a likable person. And that's what small talk is for, is to start building that. Now, once the small talk is out of the way and it's time to get down to business, the first thing you should do is ask the client what they thought of your intro packet. That's, of course, if you used an intro packet. Ask them what they thought of it, and if they have any questions pertaining to it, get that part out of the way. It'll help you transition into the business side of the meeting, and it'll give you a good foundation, for lack of a better word, to start building upon with the client. And after that is when you start asking about their project. Now, ask them about the project itself. Ask them about their business. Ask them about their family or anything else that presents itself. You're trying to use this opportunity to get to know the client as best as you can. Take advantage of it. The whole idea of this client meeting is to make the client comfortable in dealing with you. Now, in doing so, you should tell them a bit about yourself as well if they ask. This is a two-way streak after all. You can't have a one-way relationship. You need the relationship to work both ways. So as you are asking questions of them, make sure you tell a little bit about yourself. But don't take over the floor. Let them, the client, talk as much as they want. Remember, they're the ones that wanted to meet with you. You're busy and you're in demand after all. You don't need their work. Let them talk. Let them explain why they contacted you. Be attentive, focused, remember to look at them in the eye, be interested in what they have to say. Throw in a few words or gestures here and there to show them that you're listening, to show them that you understand, and to make them feel comfortable talking to you. And take notes. Even if you don't need to, have a pad and pencil or pen and take notes. Clients love seeing people taking notes. It makes them feel like you value their information. So look at them, nod, acknowledge what they say, and take notes. Then, once the client is done talking and you have a better grasp of their project and why they brought you there, only then is it time for you to ask questions. Try not to interrupt them during their process to ask questions. Take note of it and ask the questions afterwards. And ask questions that will show them that you are the perfect person for their job. Now, make sure in asking those questions that they're open-ended questions, questions that require more than a yes or no answer. Gather the information you need. Again, this is not discovery. You're gathering the information you need in order to create your proposal. So start talking about a possible solution that you can see, but without going into too much detail, because there's always the possibility that you don't end up working with this client. So this is your opportunity to not only flesh out the details of what the client needs so that you can make a proposal for them, but it's also a chance for you to show them your experience and to show them how much you care about their business. So sound enthusiastic as you talk about their project. Now, if you want to know what sort of questions to ask if you're unsure, episode 15 of the podcast, which by the way is, I believe, the most downloaded episode, it's the most searched for episode of the podcast, is 50 questions to ask before every new design project. So if you haven't listened to that one, or if it's been a while since you listened to it, you may want to go back and have a listen. You can get to it at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 15, or just look for episode 15 in wherever you listen to podcasts. But that one's a great one to prepare you for what sort of questions to ask during your client meeting. Now, while you're discussing ways that you can help the client, make sure to use examples of your past success that you've had, if there are any available. Clients love to hear case studies, especially case studies that closely match their own situation. So if you're talking with a restaurateur, maybe you can mention how you helped another restaurant if you have one in your portfolio. Or a similar industry. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but maybe you can find some sort of parallels and show them how you helped in one place and how that can translate to helping them. And finally, and this is the most uncomfortable part of the entire client meeting, you need to ask the client for their budget. I know. It's a very touchy subject, and most designers don't like broaching it. But it is necessary. You need to know their budget before you can write up your proposal, because their budget will determine the type of solution you are able to provide them. Let's say they're coming to you for a website. Well, if they have a budget of $10,000 for a website, it'll get them a much different site from you than if their budget was only $3,000. And you can explain to them that the solutions will alter depending on the budget. You're not asking for the budget because you want to milk them for everything they're worth. You're asking for their budget so that you can develop a solution that fits their need and within their money. Once you explain it that way, clients tend to understand, and then they'll come forward with the budget. I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but if you ask it with confidence, just like it was any other normal question and a question that you're used to asking all your clients, then the client will feel better answering you. So now once all that is out of the way, and before wrapping up the meeting, make sure to ask the client if they have any more questions. Now, I'll give you a little hint here. It's always a good sign when they do have more questions. It means that they are considering hiring you if they haven't already considered that you are the one they are going to hire. Clients who have no intention of hiring you seldom ask follow-up questions. What's the point if they've already decided they're not going to work with you? But with that said, don't worry if they don't have any more questions. In some cases, it's probably just because you did such a thorough job that they can't think of anything else to ask. But if they do, answer their questions to the best of your abilities. And don't be afraid to say stuff like, I don't know, or I can look into that. Take note of it and then follow through. It's okay to not have an answer if you tell them you're going to follow through. What I love doing is if somebody asks me something and I'm not sure, I'll pull out my phone and I'll call up Siri. I'm not going to say the word now because my phone's right here and it'll activate, but I'll call up Siri and I'll say, remind me when I get back home, or remind me when I get back to the office, or remind me at such and such a time to look into this information. You do that right in the presence of the client will be so impressed that yes, and then make sure you follow through, get that information and get back to them. So some key pointers that you should remember for all client meetings. 1, relax and enjoy talking to the client. Remember that you have nothing to lose and everything to gain from this client meeting. There's nothing to lose because the client wasn't yours to begin with. If they decide not to work with you, you're no worse off than before you met with them. But if they decide they do want to work with you, then you're on the path to the next step. Now, key pointer number 2 is be confident. Even if this is your very first client meeting, you're new to this and you've never done this before, pretend like you've done it countless times. It'll help you come across as a seasoned professional. 3, talk to the client like your partners. Use terms like we or us. It's not I can do this or I will do this. It's we can do this. We can design a website that'll work for you. And you're not talking we as in we, your team. This is we and us as in you and the client. Make them feel like you're partners. Pointer number 4, use the client's first name when addressing them. Remember, you're partners. They are not hiring you as a subordinate. They're hiring you on an equal level to work with them. Using their first name sounds more professional, and it creates that impression of a relationship. So forego the Mr. or Mrs. this or that, and call them by their first name and insist they do the same. Now, tip number 5, pretend like you've already won the contract. Even if you're not sure, say things like, this is how we'll do it, or I'll do this, or once we get started. Don't use terminologies like, if I get this, or should we proceed. Pretend like you've already won. In doing so, you may actually convince the client you're already on board and they will come on board that much easier. 6, if you are meeting with more than one person, if this isn't just a one-on-one meeting, you're meeting with a board or with a group of people, try to determine who is in charge and present directly to them. Find out who the most important person is there, who the decision maker is, and present directly to them. Now, don't ignore the other people in the room, but when you're looking around, glance at everybody and then stop and look at that one person as you're presenting. The other ones may have a say, but it's the decision maker you're presenting to. And this is just a side note. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. Whenever you're setting up a meeting, try to make sure that you are meeting with the decision makers. I have turned down client meetings when I found out I was meeting with, an assistant to go over stuff. If the assistant is not the one who is going to be making the decisions on whether or not they're going to hire me, I don't want to talk to them. I want to be talking face to face with the person who will have the say on whether or not I'm being hired. So whenever possible, insist on talking to that person. Now, tip number 7, practice beforehand. It's okay to stand in front of a mirror or talk while you're in the shower, or even find a friend or family member you can practice with. The more prepared you are before the meeting, the better the meeting will go. So this goes for your handshake, for your demeanor, the way you stand, the way you smile, the way you present yourself. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will feel and be during the actual meeting. And finally, if you're meeting at a neutral location, like say a restaurant or a coffee shop instead of a place of business, insist on buying a meal or at least a coffee or something for the client. You do not want the client buying something for you. It gets the whole relationship off to a bad start. You want to be buying something for the client. It's kind of a thank you. If they move forward, they're going to be paying you. So the least you can do is buy them a coffee. And don't forget, you can keep the receipts for that because they are deductible as a business expense. So those are a few key pointers to remember during the meeting. Now, when it comes time to end the meeting, once all the questions have been asked and answered, it's time to say your goodbyes. This is the last opportunity to leave a positive impression on the client. So continue to smile and be confident. Let them know how much you enjoyed meeting with them. Thank them for their time. Now leave behind a business card. You do have business cards, I hope. Leave them behind, and any other material you have. If you have a sales deck or a pitch deck or some sort of physical portfolio that you want to leave behind, leave that with the client. Keith, a member of the Resourceful Designer community, shared it's kind of a portfolio pitch deck piece. He shared it within the community. And he has a great design. It shows some of the previous work he's done and how he was able to accomplish different things. Very well designed in order to show off Keith's design skills. He even went so far as to throw a cookie recipe at the end, just for the fun of it. That's the sort of thing that you should be proud to leave behind with a client. And it's the type of thing that the client will look at and go, wow, this person cares. So leave your business card, leave any other material you have, and let the client know that if they think up any more questions after you're gone, that they can easily contact you and you would be happy to answer them. If they ask during the meeting for you to make a proposal, remind the client when they can expect to receive it. And if they don't ask for a proposal yet, let them know what they need to do to contact you if they do want to proceed any further. And after the meeting, once you get back home or to your office, make sure you follow through on anything you said. If you told them you were going to look into anything, if you told them you'd find an answer, if you told them you would give them a proposal, make sure you follow through when you said you would. And finally, the last part of this whole client meeting thing is the follow-up. If you haven't heard back from the client within a week or so, follow up with a phone call, or in this case, even an email. Let them know that you're still available if they have any more questions pertaining to their project. Now, chances are, after such a successful meeting, the client will decide to hire you. But if by chance they don't take it personally. And don't let it hurt your confidence. Even the most experienced designers in our industry still lose out on clients more often than you think. So if the client doesn't go with you, just chalk it up to a helpful learning experience. Take what you learned, take the experience, make some adjustments, and get ready for your next client meeting. So that's part 3 of the client onboarding process. Now, I would love to know how comfortable you are at presenting client meetings. Leave me a comment at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 162. And now this week's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Scott. It says, as a full-time local newspaper ad print designer for 23 years and a freelance designer when the opportunity comes up, what is the best way to boost my clients from social media or otherwise? Most of my jobs come from word of mouth. Any direction from the podcast episodes or otherwise would be greatly appreciated. Well, thank you for your question, Scott. And yeah, finding clients is always the toughest part of any design job. Now, you're lucky you are getting word of mouth. That is the number one method. In fact, my entire business is based on word of mouth for the most part. I am getting a little bit from here and there, but I'd say the bulk of my work, and you ask most designers, the bulk of their work will come from word of mouth. But that's not what you're asking. You're asking what are some other ways? Well, social media, I know some people say it really works, but I'm not 100% convinced. I think the people that get the most benefit from social media are the people that share advice. Just sharing your work on social media is not a great way to attract clients unless you're very niche down. If you have a particular thing that you do, then that might work because somebody might be looking for your unique style. But if you're just a general graphic designer or web designer and you do whatever, I personally don't think you're going to get very much on social media. Now, I may be wrong. I may be showing my age here, but that's just my thoughts. But what I do know works is having a website for yourself and optimizing it for the search engines. Now, a couple of things. You asked for some podcast episodes that may pertain to this. Episode 52 of the podcast was talking about how to make a great about page that can attract design clients. So if you are building a website, you'll want to listen to that episode because so many people get the about page wrong. They think the about page is about them, when in fact an about page should be about what you can do for your visitor. So have a listen to that one. In episode 75, I talked about how to use landing pages to attract new design clients. So another great method. Again, it comes down to a website. And just building a proper website with good SEO, using landing pages to help you with maybe some local SEO and all that stuff can drastically improve your client attraction. We had a great conversation. In fact, one of the video chats we did in the Resourceful Designer community was all about landing pages and how to use landing pages in order to attract clients. Now, if anybody's interested, all these video chats and stuff, they're all recorded and they're all available within the community. So anybody that joins the Resourceful Designer community can go back and listen to all of these great conversations we had and learn from them. If that's something that interests you, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community and see what it takes to join. And finally, Scott, there's the article I wrote, 10 Proven Ways to Attract Design Clients. You can get that at resourcefuldesigner.com/attract-clients. In that one, I share 10 methods that I actually used in order to get clients. Some of them worked better than others, but each one of those has successfully landed me at least one client. So have a read through that article. Other than that, just keep doing good work, keep spreading the word, getting yourself out there. The more you're known, the more you'll get used. And don't give up on social media. As I said, I don't personally think it'll work, but then who am I to say? There are plenty of designers out there that are getting work from social media. I'm not the person to give an answer on how to do it. So thank you very much for your question, Scott. I do appreciate it. Now, if you would like to leave me a question for a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question there. So that's it for this week's episode. Next week, I'll be continuing the series and I'll be talking about The Proposal. And I don't mean the movie. So thank you for tuning in. Please share the podcast with any design friends you may have. You can help me grow my audience and help fellow designers around the world. So until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your next client meeting. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.